Welcome everyone watching this conversation with artist Anne Rynearson. Anne is one of our artists in our current exhibition, Nature, Seen and Unseen. Anne is a fiscal 2020 recipient of an Artist Initiative grant from the Minnesota State Arts Board. Last week we held a virtual reception and we had an opportunity to see a slideshow of your exhibition paintings and hear a little bit about your inspiration and process. We do have a recording of that event on the Guild's website if viewers would like to watch your presentation. Today, with this approximately 20-minute conversation, I'm hoping that that will give us a chance to go a little bit more in depth. And thank you so much, Anne, for agreeing to join me for this conversation. And would you please just start by briefly sharing your background and your path as an artist?
Thank you, Heather. And thank you to the Northfield Arts Guild for hosting my work in an exhibition with Mary Welke. And also thanks to the Minnesota State Arts Board for helping to fund this project. Without it, it would be very difficult to do the work that I do. In terms of where I'm at this point, most of the work in the show consists of paintings, and the main material I use is acrylic paint and acrylic materials on canvas. I do other work with printmaking and a lot of drawing, but not in this exhibition. Hopefully in the future I will be able to show that work. But I got an MFA from the University of Nebraska in 2000, and ever since then I've been persevering as an artist and trying to find my way with my work. Doing lots of different things along the way. With this particular grant, I was able to pursue some ideas that were forming in my mind after a former series that I just finished in 2018, which had a lot to do with environmental themes. I grew up on a farm in southern Minnesota, and I was really interested in trying to convey some ideas I had about the things I saw in terms of changes that were happening with the land and also the connection to the history as well. So I'm very interested in nature and the environment. This new series I'm doing called Liminal Realities and then a connected element at enigmatic constructs is sort of an offshoot. It started as an offshoot from that work, still thinking about nature themes and environment, but it sort of took another turn where I was dealing less with specifically about climate change and some of those issues, just for the fact that I felt like that series had kind of come to a close and I wanted to start something new, but I wanted to sort of talk about this idea in a different way and examine it in a different way. And so I was doing a lot of reading and thinking a lot about that connection of nature between us and the universe and the things that exist in the microcosm and macrocosm that seem very similar in ways, and maybe things that we don't necessarily see, but we perceive them to be there in some way. The title for the exhibition and for the work, Liminal Realities, what does that mean? Well, liminal sort of means something that's at the threshold of something that you're kind of beginning. Realities had to do with these ideas of perception and things that we think that we understand around us as being some sort of reality. And so these liminal realities are kind of like these abstractions or abstract concepts into this idea of nature and ourselves that maybe we don't always perceive all the time, but it could be there, like, multi-dimensions or different states or subjective states of perception, things like that.
Gotcha. So I think what you just said made me think of all the layers that the meanings behind your work. How much is the physical layering of paint, or when you were doing prints, like how much does that factor in to this body of work?
I would say a lot. The idea of layering is something that I've actually been kind of exploring for a long time, even from when I was a student as an undergrad. I really liked, layering sort of more opaque solid forms with glazing and more transparent layers. So you get these kind of like forms that, you know, are there, but they're sort of veiled and unveiled, you know, as you're working on the piece. Layering to me is also kind of, it's like a way of sort of building the image. When I think of painting too, which is kind of goes back very much to how I was taught about painting, but it's like, what I love about it is it's obviously this object of illusion, you know, the history of painting. We think of painting as a window into something, a view of something, you know, a depiction of something that we see or something that's in our vision in a representational way. But I also, you know, with, you know, modernism, we very much came into painting as being about the objectness of a painting, that it can exist as that in that way as well. And so I always have had this kind of thing where I think about it as an illusionistic thing, as sort of a portal or a window into something, but it's very much about it, the objectness of it as well, where I'm very interested in the formal aspects and, you know, the edges of the painting and how that interacts with what you see on the surface. And so layering kind of reinforces that both ways to me. Like, it helps create the image that you see, but it's also about the physicality of the paint. Sure. And how that looks on the surface as well.
Those two paintings that you've got behind you, I know you said one of them you feel is done and one you're still working on. How do you know how does it feel done to you?
Well, I think for me, it has a lot to do with balance in the composition. When I feel like it works, you know, paintings to me are never perfect. But, you know, it's like they feel done when I feel like there's a certain amount of balance in terms of, you know, the formal aspects of the piece, or if there's something about it that conveys some kind of idea that I'm thinking about in that moment with the piece and it seems to work for me, then I'll leave it alone. The large kind of purple painting is still in progress. It's a very large piece. It's 5 feet by 6 feet. And so it's just taking me a while, but it's at that stage where it's just not quite there yet. You know, I feel like I have to add more and add and subtracting a lot with it until it achieves something. There's like this magical moment for me, you know, where I feel like it's working. And sometimes things, you know, I work them to death and they have to go away because they just never achieve that feeling that I want in the end. But that's okay. I always feel like I can start something else, you know.
Do you go into a section of it? Do you approach the overall piece when you're looking to keep working on it? How does that process go for you?
I think often I have this kind of vision about a piece before I start working on it. And I often have, I mean, it's a very general idea of, you know, something how I want it to look, or maybe there's an idea that has come to me that I feel like, how can I convey that in the piece? On the smaller pieces, it's, you know, a little more easy to kind of work more generally and overall and do lots of things at once. Okay. Often the big pieces, I'll have to work on sections because they're just physically bigger. In terms of like process, one thing I've been doing a lot this last year is exploring pouring paint and splattering paint. So as kind of a base. So like with the big purple painting, I had it on the floor, the canvas, and then I was pouring the paint and then, adding other paint as it was drying to create these different forms and manipulate how the forms would flow across the canvas, let it dry, come back, maybe add other elements. Like the process it's in right now, I'm actually adding some grid areas. I'm drawing with a white India ink pen to create like these structural elements in it because it's very organic and stuff. And I always feel like I need that kind of like more like, formal things like grids or hard edge shapes or something to kind of balance that. And then I'll probably come back again and do something else again. But it's very kind of a malleable process for me. until it sort of becomes something that I didn't expect, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, that unknowing it comes through in your pieces too, that exploration. So yeah, I can see that. Do you start with sketches of an idea, or do you just start putting paint on the canvas?
I've never been a person to do preliminary drawings. When I do drawings or works on paper, they're kind of their own thing.
Yeah.
And they're with painting, I just like to get in there. I just like to start painting, and I guess I just love paint, and I love, the color of paint and the texture of paint, and I just want to start working on it right away, because it always changes so much anyway. It never ends up the way I started. I may have something really great that's really interesting. Like there's some little paintings I started that I really loved how the paint dried and it formed all these really interesting little shapes. But the painting it wasn't speaking to me. So I felt like I still had to go back into it. And ultimately, sometimes those things that you really like, you have to cover up because it's just not working overall. So, which is something that's hard, especially I think when you're younger, you don't want to ruin, your work. You don't want to ruin the painting if there's something nice in it. But I've just, I've kind of given that up because sometimes I end up with something way better, than what I started out with. So
Yeah. Oh, that sense of playfulness and exploration really does come through in your pieces.
thank you.
Uh, uh, how did you decide to be a painter? You mentioned printmaking.
Yeah.
Does the printmaking influence your paintings? Do you work on things simultaneously? How does that go for you?
It's been a really interesting thing that's evolved because I never did printmaking when I was a student. Um, there was a printmaking program, but I always felt like it was so separate from painting when I was a student. And it wasn't until I met my husband, who is a printmaker, that's kind of his main media, that I really started to learn about it and discover how interesting and how kind of like related it was to my original feeling about layering, because printmaking is very much about layering and creating matrices that overlap, and you can create your image that way. And I just thought, well, this makes so much sense to me. With my last series, I actually took a class to learn about Photoshop because I never had that in school either. It seems like everybody is born knowing how to do Photoshop now, but I didn't, so I had to take a class. But even that too, reinforced that idea of creating these kind of layers, because you could create digital layers. And I did explore some of that too when I had a residency in Germany in 2017, and it was like where we did screen printing. And so that was very much making the different screens and layering them and, playing around with that. So I think it kind of reinforced that with me, and it helped me discover how much I really like that idea of doing that in painting. It's obviously a different kind of process, but I think that kind of essential idea of having these different images or, painted layers kind of weaving in to each other is still really interesting to me.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's more to explore with this particular body of work that you're exhibiting? What are you excited about tackling next?
Yeah, this series, this just feels like the beginning of it for me. I have a lot of other things that I'm working on and things that I'm thinking about and creating. About halfway through the year when I was working on this new series, this other kind of part of the title emerged, enigmatic constructs. And it just occurred to me that, I just love the word enigma because it's so much about like abstraction to me, or this kind of state of subjectivity, in the piece. And also like this open-endedness that, I appreciate narrative and kind of storytelling in the work, but I don't want it to be overly specific. I like that kind of open-ended feeling with the work. And some of these new pieces I'm really interested in, just kind of seeing where they end up without trying to create an idea on the front end about them.
Yep.
And so I think that the new work is kind of heading in that direction. I still have ideas about, maybe stories that I'm pulling from, but it's not such a direct connection for me. It's just really about just exploring the process quite a bit.
Sure.
So
How much is the size of the canvas that you pick play into this next? Are you going larger?
both. Again, I still have quite a few really large pieces.
Yeah.
I have some that are 4 by 6 feet. I have some squares that are 5 by 5. But I am also really enjoying working smaller because historically I've been a big canvas painter. Ever since I was a student, I always loved doing really large pieces because I just love the feeling of expansiveness and kind of being in the work when I'm, in the studio. And sometimes it's really hard to kind of translate things when you work really big onto a smaller piece, because sometimes I feel confined or I have to work, smaller. But I think now I'm starting to learn how to enjoy working smaller more, because I can work a little more quickly and move on to other things a little more quickly. And then just trying not to be too uptight about it, but it does have advantages too. But I am still doing both. So
Awesome. Well, I just want to invite folks to come and see your work in person. We've got 10 paintings now in the show Nature Seen and Unseen at the Northfield Arts Guild. And they do really have that sense of expansiveness, even though they are a smaller scale. So I want to also point out that we have a virtual tour of the exhibition on the Guild's website, northfieldartsguild.org. This work will be on display until February 6th. And so please come see it in person, or the virtual tour, or the exhibition catalog, which is also on the Guild's website. And I just want to thank you again for taking this time to share a little bit more about your work and your inspiration. And thanks so much, Anne.
thank you, Heather.
Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.